topic of our presentation is the use of native and introduced non-invasive plant material, which we will be condensing down into the applications of these plants in urban constructed wetlands and reclamation areas, and the benefits that this will have on the natural zone and animal habitat. First, let's define native. The term native refers to a species, place, or region of origin. Native plants are those that occur naturally in a region in which they evolved without known human influence or cause. In Canada, these are species that were already established in the landscape prior to the European American settlement. The opposite of native is naturalized or exotic. It is not encouraged to plant non-native plants, as they have characteristics of displacing native species. Sometimes we choose plants based on their appearance, hardiness, or quick growth. But why else should we choose native plants over non-native plants? Native plants are vital for preserving biodiversity and act as a habitat for the surrounding wildlife. They are adapted to the local environmental conditions in their native region, and so require far less water than introduced plants. Their activities often play a role in shaping and/or maintaining the ecosystem. Native species are low maintenance since they grow on their own terms in our environment already. They are used for reclamation and remediation by naturalizing industrialized areas and filtering contaminants through phytoremediation. One of the most difficult things to manage is a landscape that has been taken over by an invasive plant species. Protecting the plant community is essential, and we can do this by avoiding introduction of invasive species. When managing an invasive species, herbicides should be a last resort to gain control. Exhaustive and costly manual methods or biological control methods might have to be implemented. This reaffirms the importance of learning to identify invasive non-native plants as well as native plants. Staying up to date on invasive species also helps with prevention. There are also native species of plants that can be dominant in an environment and become a hindrance. A native plant that can impede on other less vigorous native species around it. Native species such as cattails can spread prolifically, but in the correct quantity, these plants are very beneficial. The right balance is important when it comes to anything natural, including native species. The term invasive describes exotic plants thriving outside cultivation, expanding into natural areas and disrupting native plant communities. Landscapes with dominant non-native plants can have negative impacts, including reducing biodiversity, imperiling endangered or threatened species, reducing aesthetics, degrading water quality, and reducing wildlife habitat by eliminating native food resources. The picture on the slide is showing an aquatic plant called parrot feather, and it is threatening wetlands in BC and eastern Ontario. This certain plant prevents the native aquatic plants from growing and suffocates wetlands. We've included a short list of useful native plants in the Alberta region. Plants on the left would be typically used in constructed wetlands for their ability to survive a wetter environment and filtering contaminants. The plants on the right are typically used in reclamation sites, where they are filling in areas disturbed by industrial and human activities. Cattails are a native perennial plant with distinctive brown sausage-shaped tails. They grow in fresh wetlands throughout North America. Cattails can be very beneficial to have and are often encouraged by wetland designers and remediation developers. Cattails are a great plant to use when creating a shoreline buffer to prevent erosion because of their dense rhizomes. And not only that, cattails have an amazing ability to absorb phosphorus, nitrogen, and other elements that may harm natural water sources and wetlands. Plus, they are one of the best choices for providing nesting and breeding habitat for a variety of desirable wildlife. Native plants are also much more beneficial in supporting native wildlife than non-native or invasive plant species. A sustaining native plant community is the key to preserving a healthy and diverse wildlife population. Let's take a constructed wetland as an example. What wildlife are going to be occupying the site? Probably birds, insects, fish, and/or rodents. Wetlands provide a great benefit to birds when a mixture of plants are available. Establishment of native chosen vegetation for a site will provide food supplies, shelter, and nesting materials.
The Alberta government defines reclamation as the process of converting disturbed land to its former or other productive uses. There was no requirement in Alberta to reclaim industrial disturbances until 1963, when the Surface Reclamation Act was introduced. Reclamation is the act of returning the land to a sustainable landscape. Some of the reasons for wetland reclamation projects include the creation of wildlife habitat, improvement of water quality, water storage and conservation, returning landscapes to their natural state after human disturbance, reducing human impact, and enriching plant diversity. The establishment of a native plant community in a project is the standard of success. Collection of native plant material should be done within a conservative radius of the site and also selected to enrich plant diversity. Research is essential to confirm that plants are site-specific and include only native species known from that area. Adjacent wetlands can be a great resource to know what to select to allow natural regeneration. Two of the largest oil field companies in Alberta are Syncrude Canada and Suncor. Syncrude has permanently reclaimed over 3,800 hectares of land to date, with an additional 1,000 hectares currently capped with soil and ready for revegetation. They have planted over 8.5 million tree and shrub seedlings on their pre-existing mines and are the first oil sands operator to receive certification for a 104-hectare area of reclaimed land called Gateway Hill. They began reclaiming this section in the 1980s and received the certificate in 2008. Suncor has disturbed around 22,000 hectares of land since 1967, and by the end of 2017 has reclaimed around 10%, including over 2,000 hectares of terrestrial land and 50 hectares of wetlands. In 2017 alone, over 400,000 trees and shrubs were planted, bringing their total number since 1976 to approximately 8 million. Phytoremediation is the direct use of living plants to filter and remove contaminants in soils, sediments, and water. It is a low-cost and low-energy technique and is useful for treating a wide variety of environmental contaminants. Plant root systems can degrade organic pollutants and stabilize metal contaminants by acting as a trap. They can be used to clean up metals, pesticides, solvents, crude oil, and landfill leachates. Native plants are used for phytoremediation in sites such as constructed wetlands and areas impacted by human activities. In the usage of phytoremediation to treat organic contaminants, it can be further categorized into three processes: phytodegradation, rhizodegradation, and phytovolatilization. Phytodegradation is the breakdown of contaminants taken up by plants through metabolic processes within the plant. Complex organic pollutants are degraded into simpler molecules and are incorporated into the plant tissues. Rhizodegradation is the breakdown of contaminants in the rhizosphere through microbial activity. Certain microorganisms can digest organic substances that are hazardous to humans and break them down into harmless products. Phytovolatilization is the uptake and transpiration of a contaminant by the plant, which then releases a modified form of the contaminant into the atmosphere by evaporation. In the case of treating metal contaminants, the plant can be used to either stabilize or remove the metals from the soil and groundwater through three mechanisms: phytoextraction, rhizofiltration, and phytostabilization. Phytoextraction is the uptake of metals from soil by plant roots into the stem of the plant. Plants that can absorb unusually large amount of metals are called hyperaccumulators. Rhizofiltration is similar to phytoextraction, except the metals are taken up from contaminated groundwater rather than the soil. One notable plant that accomplishes this is the sunflower, which was used to remove radioactive contaminants from pond water in Chernobyl. Phytostabilization is the use of certain plant species to immobilize contaminants in the soil and groundwater through absorption and accumulation by the root system. This reduces the mobility of the contaminant and prevents migration to the air or groundwater. Alberta's wetlands are of significant value, as we have learned. They provide benefits to our society, economy, and environment. Wetland restoration is a very active field today, as this is primarily due to many provincial regulations. The Alberta Wetland Policy was created in 2013 to conserve, restore, protect, and manage Alberta's wetlands. Wetlands are constructed in urban areas with native plants to assist with filtering contaminants from stormwater and nearby rivers. Water runoff makes its way through the wetland and is slowly cleaned in the process. Constructed wetlands are typically engineered to manage stormwater and reduce human impact. A few local constructed wetlands in southern Alberta include the Olds College Botanic Gardens, Ralph Klein Park in Calgary, the Michael O'Brien Wetlands in Red Deer, and the Williamstown Nose Creek Preserve in Airdrie. These examples show us a range in size and diversity that a constructed wetland can offer. Some can be designed specifically for contaminant removal, land reclamation, or to treat stormwater runoff. In summary, when it comes to reestablishing wetland landscapes, native plants are typically the best choice for reclamation and stormwater management. Native plants are important for the surrounding ecosystem, and they benefit both the environment and society in the long run. Phytoremediation from native plants is a very effective way to filter contaminants from storm and floodwaters. Native plants are also water conserving and are typically non-invasive and environmentally efficient. Even when planting your own natural area, be sure to decide on some wonderful native plants. Thank you for listening. That concludes our presentation on the uses of native plants in reclamation and constructed wetlands.